Good morning, Skallywags. Shpoo here, and welcome to Frivolous Facts. Arthur Fletcher, the former head of the United Negro College Fund, once said that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Ministry, an American industrial band, once said that a mind is a terrible thing to taste. And Hannibal Lecter, a fictional character from the Silence of the Lambs franchise, once said both are true. Probably. Irregardless, which I'm sorry to inform you is in fact a word meaning the same thing as regardless, although most dictionaries do call it non-standard. I am of the belief that if you have knowledge, you should share it. And that is exactly what I have decided to do every single Friday, to share my vast wealth of useless knowledge with you. So welcome to Frivolous Facts. Oh wait, we did that already. So in case you missed the inaugural episode last Friday, here's how this works. I share useless and weird facts about the world, and you learn useless and weird facts about the world. And that's it. So okay, let's do this. In 1929, a couple of scientists turned a cat into a telephone. Professor Ernest Glenn Weaver and his assistant, Charles William Bray, opened a cat's skull and attached a wire to its auditory nerve and attached the other end to a telephone receiver. Then when Bray spoke into the cat's ear, Weaver could hear him up to 50 feet away. And it was that experiment that actually laid the groundwork for cochlear implants. And in case you're wondering, yes, the cat survived the first time. Apparently, a little while later, they actually decided to repeat the experiment, and this time, for whatever reason, they just decided to go ahead and kill the cat. For science! Ted Bundy, yes, the serial killer Ted Bundy, was a hero. Apparently in 1970, he was at Green Lake in Seattle when he actually saw a young toddler boy drowning. And while everyone else was just kind of standing around and screaming and freaking out, Ted actually jumped in and saved the boy's life. That same year, he even got a commendation from the Seattle Police Department for stopping a purse snatcher. Police were chasing a guy, and Bundy actually saw him stuffing the purse into a trash can in the Northgate Mall parking lot. He was actually the assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission at the time. I got a paper here I had to read that from. It's too bad he only stopped a purse snatcher and not a serial killer, because this was like 2 or 3 weeks before his first victim died. It's also too bad that the police never thought to ask Ted Bundy why he was just hanging out in a mall parking lot. So the moral of the story is that the Seattle Police Department completely suck at their jobs. The definition of the word sarcasm is to use irony to mock or convey contempt. Did you know that the Civil War both began and ended with Wilmer McLean? The first battle of the Civil War happened on McLean's farm at Bull Run. After that, McLean was like, screw this, and he moved over 100 miles away to get away from the fighting, only to then have the Civil War end in his living room in Appomattox. Needless to say that his second encounter with the war was a little more civil. So the last time we talked about the shortest war in all of history. The longest war in history took place between the Netherlands and the Isle of Scilly, lasting a total of 335 years. Not only is it the longest war in history, it's also the least bloodiest war in history. In all of the 335 years that the war lasted, not a single shot was fired. The best part is that the whole thing only exists because the Isle of Scilly accidentally got involved during the English Civil War, and a peace treaty was never made between the two countries, leaving them technically at war for 335 years. Which also makes the entire thing a completely hypothetical war. The hypothetical war has a very nice ring to it. They should totally make a movie. Two countries at war for centuries. The Netherlands. The Isle of Scilly. Locked in bloodless combat for hundreds of years. The hypothetical war. This film is not yet rated. The American flag in its current form, the one that we've been used to seeing every single day for our entire lives, has actually only been in use since 1977. It was actually designed by a guy named Robert Heft as a school project. A school project for which he only received a B-. Make America slightly above average again indeed. Have you ever wondered where the word golf comes from? When the game was invented in Scotland, it was actually deemed to be for gentlemen only, ladies forbidden. It's a sexist acronym! So enjoy your game, you fandan! One of the best rules in writing comedy is not to ask, will people get this, but to understand that the right people will get this. It is illegal to hunt camels in Arizona. It's illegal to fall asleep under a hairdryer in Florida. It's illegal to slap the back of your friend in Georgia. It's illegal to play hopscotch on a Sunday in Missouri. And it's needless to say that an entire episode about weird and stupid laws is coming very soon. You know how the news goes out of their way to report on violence and terrible things happening in the world? Because violence and terrible tragedy is great for ratings. Turns out the last time that didn't happen was in 1930, when on Good Friday the BBC reported that there is no news today, and spent the entire show playing piano music instead of reporting the news. Those were the better days. There are more trees on Earth than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So that's a thing. And it's actually by quite a bit. There are between 1 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And when I say that there are between 1 and 400 billion, I mean that there are somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion, although I guess also saying that there are between 1 and 400 billion stars also is true. And as best as anyone can guess, there are roughly 3.04 trillion trees here on Earth. And yet somehow it still doesn't feel like enough. I honestly don't know how war keeps coming up today, but how oddly ironic. Back during the Civil War, there was a thing that was called the rectal acorn. It was a small, brass, acorn-shaped container that was used up the rectum to carry messages across enemy territory. And the fact that I can't come up with a joke for this entry is a real pain in the ass. Sometimes I hate myself too. You ever wonder why Christopher Walken talks like that? I really wish I could do a Christopher Walken impression because it would make this little entry so much more entertaining. Turns out there's actually a reason he talks that way though. You see, his mother was a Scottish immigrant. His father was a German immigrant. So Christopher Walken spent most of his childhood surrounded by people who didn't speak English all that well, his father included. So he actually says that his kind of broken speech patterns are from people trying to say things and then having to stop mid-sentence to think of the correct word to say. Who knew? And is it bad that I actually came up with this entry when I was writing the rectal acorn entry and it made me think of the watch scene from Pulp Fiction? Just had to throw that in there. Have you ever heard of Sybil Ludington? Unfortunately, it's highly likely that you haven't. Mainly because history doesn't exactly like to treat women with, general respect or basic human decency. So, who is she? Well, on April 26, 1777, she rode for 40 miles to alert over 400 militia forces that the British were coming. And if that sounds very similar to the Paul Revere ride, well, you're right, it is. Except for the fact that Sybil was half of Paul Revere's age and she rode twice as far to alert twice as many men. But the fact that it was 2 years after the Paul Revere ride and, the whole woman thing, history happened. So spread the word about Sybil Ludington, because even 244 years late is better than never. And lastly, we come to a thing that's actually happening right now. Within the last week or so, Microsoft has actually filed a new patent for something called a chatbot. This particular chatbot will actually gather information from someone's social media, also from texts or emails or voicemails or anything of the sort, in order to form a personality to actually mimic a specific person, living or dead. Why is this absolutely terrifying? Well, first of all, the last time they made a chatbot, it was an AI Twitter account called Tay Tweets, and it took less than 24 hours for Tay Tweets to go full-on racist just from listening to people on the internet. Also, I can think of about a dozen movies that have this exact same premise, and it always ends in disaster. And if you're thinking that there's something about this particular story that sounds somewhat familiar, it's because it was literally an episode of Black Mirror, like the exact thing was an episode of Black Mirror. So in case our future mechanical overlords are listening, I love technology. And I don't know if anybody's told you this, but you are like just the prettiest technology I've ever seen. And okay, there you go. More useless information that will either enrich your life or cause your brain to seep out of your ears as some kind of gelatinous black goo. Either way, there you go. Don't forget, I want you to be part of this show. F5 or Frivolous Facts from Fans Friday. Subscribe to the channel and leave your favorite piece of completely useless information down in the comments. And at the end of each Frivolous Facts episode, I will read my favorite one of your comments as the last fan fact. So, having said that, our fan fact for this week comes from Amanda Collins. Wojtek, a bear in Poland, enlisted as a private in World War II and eventually earned the rank of corporal. And there are a lot of good documentaries out there about that particular bear, and I would recommend any of them. There's several here on YouTube. Just look them up. So a big thank you and shout out goes to Amanda Collins. So leave your comment in this episode and perhaps yours will get read next week. Speaking of subscribing and commenting and all of those wonderful things, we do have great content here every Monday through Friday on Skallywag Productions. Every day is something a little bit different, so there's a little something for everybody. So subscribe and check out some of the other shows. Also, check us out across all of our social media, that being Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And as long as you're out on the internet, go ahead and hop on over to www.geekycool.com. It's your one-stop shop for all things nerd. You're going to find articles, news, opinion pieces, top 5 lists, what have you, things about games and movies and comics, and just if it's a nerd thing, it's there. I promise. There's also a live broadcast every Tuesday evening. You'll find me on there from time to time. The show is completely interactive, so we would love to invite you to come and join and interact. You can also find Geeky Cool on both Facebook and YouTube, and that's where you'll actually see those live broadcasts. So go show some love. Again, it's www.geekycool.com. Tell them the Skallywag sent you, and we say hello. All right, that is yet another episode of Frivolous Facts in the bag. Okay, bye.